have we come to grips as leaders, as parents, as spouses, that it is not about me only. It is about things that transcend me, things that are bigger than my interests and my comfort.
Well, welcome to another great episode from FCCI's Pathway to Purpose podcast. This is part 2 of Henry Cloud's message entitled, Leader, How's Your Wake? I'm Ken Powell, podcast host here at FCCI, and after you listen to this episode, please do go back and listen to part 1 of this message where Henry provided a powerful and compelling definition of virtue, giving us a framework of acknowledging virtue as a force that is measured through results and relationships, those two metrics that comprise the wake of a leader. In this episode, Dr. Cloud digs into the anatomy or the makeup of a leader that leaves a healthy wake behind them of results and relationships. Here's Dr. Cloud.
So what we're talking about here is integrating and embracing all of you, because God made you in His image. And what we find is that leaders who integrate and leaders who create teams and cultures that allow people to integrate, to come in with their strengths and weaknesses, to come in with their empathy as well as their convictions. There's somebody like that. You read about him in Psalm 85 or 68. Or, Pastor, help me. 2 factors is what the research says. 2 factors. Results in relationships. This person that we read about in the Bible, it always comes back to 2 factors. It says that in him, righteousness and love have met. In the psalm, it says, indeed, in him, they have kissed each other. You can't disintegrate God from His grace and His truth. A codependent has grace, and it's hard to stand up and say that this is not right. And so the love becomes unusable because it's not integrated. The one that always stands for what's right can never heal anybody because the law is powerless, and it takes love and grace and giving to make them able to be able to live up to that righteousness. And that's like leadership. It's the integrated person. So what I went to work on was asking the question, what's this boat made out of? In the great leaders, what's the anatomy of the construction? What's the blueprint look like? So I tried to make it simple, and I boiled it down to 6 things, which I'm going to race through today. And the people that teach you how to speak, remember what they told you? Keep it short and simple. You're not supposed to give 6 points, but I'm going to give them to you. But I already told you there's only 2, really. So here's what leadership character looks like according to the research, according to our experience, because what you see is leaders that get to a certain level, you get to the executive team level, rise up to that level, all of these people look the same at a certain level. They all have the same IQ. They have the same pedigrees. They have the same degrees. They have the same years of experience in the industry. And then there are those leaders that bust through the ceiling and they get to here. And this gap right here is about their makeup. It's who they are as people. And I would propose to you in 6 really important dimensions. Number 1, I talked to you about this in DC, so I'm not going to go into it again at depth, but I'm going to remind you of it. That leadership character is able to do 2 things. It is able to create trust, and then it's able to maintain that trust. And leaders are good at persuading people and getting them to jump on board. But after they're on board, they do something fatal. They lose connection with the people they're leading because they're persuaders. And they never sometimes listen. They persuade. I was I was negotiating a squabble 3 weeks ago, a $20 billion deal that had broken down with partners, 4 partners had been together for 25 years. And this is what was wrong. And it was all about, they weren't lying, cheating, or stealing. They weren't understanding each other. One of them didn't want to go forward with this acquisition, this merger. The other ones did. They weren't listening. In fact, early on in the meeting, one of them was telling his perspective, the other was going, yeah, but that's because, I said, whoa, does he always do that? And they said, I said, does he always finish your sentences for you and interrupt you? This is a really big performer. He looked down, said, yeah. Nobody on this team wants to hear what I have to say. We found out that for the last 6 months he had been kind of excluded, really, because he wasn't immediately for the deal. But he had some real issues, and those were solvable if somebody would listen. I remember one time I got called into this situation as another global entity, and the CEO and the board was just, it was awful. And the whole thing was about to blow up. And it would have affected lives all around the globe. So we went in there and they start to talk. And then it got really, really gross. The CEO's trying to talk about what's he feels like is important and doing, and the chairman just kind of shuts him down, gentlemanly, if you will, but ugly. And I stopped. I said, hold on a second. When he does that, what do you feel? He goes, what are you talking about? Feelings in a boardroom of a global entity. I feel the bottom line. No. But I caught him. When I said that, he says, well, and then he started to quiver. And I said, just talk to me. He takes his portfolio, he sits up, he closes it, and he says, I'm done here. I quit. Starts to get up, he's walking out. The board is like, because this is a big, there are going to be major consequences. You would read about it. Starts to walk out. I ran over here and I stood in front of the door and I looked at him and I said, you can walk out that door. If you do, and you let these relationships break down, if you do, you will set into motion huge consequences that are going to affect hundreds of thousands of lives. So will you give me a minute just to talk to you? He nods. I said, sit down. There were no chairs. And he looks at me. I said, just sit down. And I guess, when you're with a crazy person, you do what they say, right? And it's like, I guess he felt held hostage or so. So I sit down on the floor and I start asking, I said, how often does he do that? What are some of the key issues that you're trying to get across to the board that they can't get in because he's not listening? And I said, but more than that, what does it do to your self? And that's when he started to kind of break down. He started to cry. Well, I can't see this happening. But over here, the chairman gets out of his chair, walks over, goes and puts his hands on the CEO, and he says, I never knew I was doing that to you. I am so sorry. And I said to the board, will you guys give us a little bit of time? We went to another room, spent some time there, a good amount of time. We came back in. We actually had to call the board back in because it took a couple hours. And they said, okay, we think we can work this out. Gaining trust and maintaining trust is going to come when people feel like you understand their needs. You don't have to agree with them, but they need to be heard. The FBI hostage negotiators will tell you that. You don't walk into the building with the guy with the bomb strapped on him and say, dude, this is a dumb idea. That's not what they do. They say, so what's your name? How did we get here today? What's it been like for you? Because feeling understood is the most important thing, and it's what Jesus did for us. He told us what was right. He told us where we were headed. He cast the vision. He gave the strategy, and it failed. It failed. Paul says it very clearly. Being right won't do it with humans. He says the law, righteous as it was powerless to change us, to lead us, to get us where we needed to go, to get that CEO back to the table. It was powerless. Being right is not step one. So what did he do? He understood us, and he took off his rightness, as Philippians 2 says. He shed himself of all that it meant to be God, and we play God a lot in our interactions. And he took on human flesh, and he came down, and nobody can say to Jesus, you don't understand what it's like to not be accepted in your mission. You don't understand what it's like to be rejected or be an outcast in a team. Nobody can say that. Because we have a high priest that can sympathize because he's experienced it all. So let your people feel that way. Second thing of this boat, truth. Be oriented towards the truth. Now, this is more than honesty. Great leaders have a GPS inside of them. They have a North Star that's all, wherever they find themselves, they're looking for their best friend, their boss, reality. They're looking for what's true. They don't care about right or wrong or who's did it, or they just want to find what's real. And a Navy SEAL lands, and the first thing they do is they look at their GPS, and the first question is, where am I? What's really going on? Have I landed on the wrong side of Saddam's wall? Where am I? What's the reality here? And the second thing they want to know is, where's the enemy? And the third thing is, where's my buddy? And they get a good bearing on where they are. I had a friend who's the global head of marketing for Procter & Gamble. He had great success in Japan, Australia. They sent him to China. Youngest VP of marketing Procter & Gamble ever had, and that was back then that's the marketing job of the world. He actually, he quit at 40. And he was in the pool where the CEO of Procter & Gamble would have come from, and he quit at 40. Wall Street Journal does an article. Whiz kid leaves for God. God visited him in China when he went there, and he became a pastor. And now he's a pastor in Cincinnati. His name's Dennis Boziger. But I asked him one day, I said, Dennis, you moved to China, the business didn't exist, you took it to a couple of billion within a year. How'd you do that? He said, well, I got a job on a rice farm. I said, a job on a rice farm? I said, why'd you go to work on a rice farm? He said, because I didn't know anything about understanding the people and what their lives look like. And I thought if I got a job on a rice farm, I worked there for a couple of months, then I would understand. I'd find reality, find the truth of what it's like. I said, but you're selling soap. I go, don't you just pour it in the box and hit play? I mean, that's kind of Tide or Cheer or whatever it is they sell. He said, but I don't understand really what. He said, what I learned was some amazing truth. When I went looking for it, I learned that there was a water pressure problem. throughout the country, and there was a water hardness problem. And you can't get suds with low water pressure in hard water or soft water, I don't know which. So I went looking for that reality, and I found it. I took it back to Cincinnati, and I gave it to the guys in the lab, and they came up with an enzyme where you can get suds in soft water or hard water and low water pressure. And we ran a national campaign. Bubbles at home sales went through the roof. See, a lot of times we think we know. Comes in, well, I've done this in Japan, I've done it in Australia, everybody out of the way, I know how to sell soap. Well, no, we don't. When Ed Catmull had to merge Disney and Pixar, he said the biggest problem was the culture. And it couldn't innovate because basically a lack of safety. And he created a rule when they're building a movie with the artists, and the rule was ideas have no rank. The CEO's sitting there and the intern is sitting there. We're looking for the best idea. We don't care where it comes from. That was their culture. So we're going to be looking, and we do this in 1,000 ways, but don't just listen to yourself. Open systems of input. Thirdly, results. An orientation to results. Now, I've talked about results, but here's what I mean about your makeup. See, a lot of times we think of character as a work ethic, but you can work really hard and not get great results because of our makeup gets in the way, and it happens to all of us. But let me give you just a couple of examples. You ever heard this? Ready, aim, fire. That's a great description of the leader's brain. That the prefrontal cortex organizes myriads, billions and billions and billions and billions and billions of connections inside of experience. And it works all this. You don't even know what's happening as you're leading and as you're thinking and you're looking at a deal or a market. And it's getting all of that, and then it comes up with this plan to get from here to there. And the first thing it says is, are we ready? Do we have enough capital? Do we have the right people? What's the right timing? Do we have the equipment? Are we in the, and it's getting ready. Jesus said, nobody goes and builds a tower without first considering the cost, or you're going to run out of cash. Are we ready? And then aim. Not being scattered, but we've got to get focused, and we got to get everybody aiming at the main thing. And if everything's important, nothing is. And the leader's able to focus and do that and get everybody focused. And then they got to be able to fire. They got to be able to actually jump and not be afraid and go do it and get moving. But let me ask you a question. Have you ever worked for a leader that was fire, ready, aim? Next shiny object. Oh, this is great. The last person they talk to is the new expert of the world. And they launch stuff, and their people go, yesterday we were doing this, and now, and they're impulsive, and they create ADD wakes. Bo doesn't know where the hell it's going. Everywhere. Or how about this one? I know a guy like this just drives me. Ready, 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 ready. Peter, jump out of the boat. We're at dock now. We missed the opportunity. We're scared. Paralysis, overanalysis. You'll never have certainty. You'll only get clarity. Certainty's in the rearview mirror. Number 4, negative realities. The ability to embrace is the word I like to use. Embrace, hug, kiss, make out with, slobber all over. Negative reality. Why? Because that's your job. If you're president of the United States, first thing that happens after you tweet, the first thing that happens in the morning is they put this book on your desk, and it's not happy talk. It's everything that can blow up in the world that day because you're in that seat. Now, if our makeup is one that we're conflict avoidant, there's a negative reality, or there's bad numbers, or we got a problem with an investor or a customer or somebody, the great leaders do something. They move towards, that's the first phone call they make. They move towards that negative reality and they embrace it. You went and moved towards the Father that you had a conflict with. Years of avoiding it didn't do it, he shared with us. Guess what? You solve problems as a leader, you know what your reward's going to be? If you're really good at solving problems, they'll give you bigger problems. Have a nice life. That's it. Problems get bigger. I did a hospital deal one time with a public company. They had a sign across the back of the war room. It said, no problems, no profits. And what they were doing, and this was before neuroscience could document this, they were orienting the brain to normalize stuff happens. If you wake up and you got some problems, that means you woke up. And if you get really good at it, see, a toddler, you spill the milk, that ruins the day. We got to get past little things causing the nuclear bombs to go off. I was at an airport, a guy didn't get the seat he wanted. He's railing at the gate agent. And I said, dude, what do you do when you have a real problem? I mean, you just spin it all. There's nothing left. But what if you grew up with critical voices and one little failure takes you through the bottom and start taking on water, or a dive in the market? I remember in 2008, working on Wall Street, you could see the difference. And there were leaders there in those firms. They were able to lead their people through that. But their boats weren't afraid. Certainly they were afraid, but they weren't paralyzed by the negative realities. They didn't have fight or flight. They have had enough experiences in life to love them through their failures, to teach them when they fail, that they can learn, to teach them that life is a narrative of a long story. And like every cheesy chick flick, can you say that now? I'm sorry, romantic comedy. My wife calls them that. She goes, you're not going to like it. There's always the mid-movie breakup scene or the towards the end movie. It falls apart. Every serious negotiation you'll ever see that's about big things has that scene in it. What if you went to a surgeon? 10 minutes into the operation, the surgeon goes, oh crap, he's bleeding. That's your job. Move into it. No problems, no profits. Jesus said, in the world you have tribulation, but take courage, I have overcome the world. Teach your people. Let's go embrace these problems. Ed Catmull, they made all those great movies, Nemo and all that stuff. They won everything. After the movie is done, they bring it into the room, he says, and they all say the same mantra. When they watch the movie that they've worked on for 2 years, they all agree to the same mantra. You know what it is? This movie sucks. Our job is to make it unsuck. In this movie, you have tribulation. There's scenes that could be better, as good as we think it is. There's lines that could be crisper. And nobody's threatened that their line gets changed because they'll embrace the negative realities. And then increase. Leaders are not maintainers. Leaders grow things. And the only way to grow things is to get out over your skis. And if your character is afraid of anxiety, then there's only 3 choices. Death will take care of it. When you die, you won't be anxious anymore. Some people will. Drugs will take care of it. Drugs come in many forms. 14 large pizzas, porn addiction, heroin, illicit relationships, flatterers. And the third thing is to stay in our comfort zone. But everything we know about growing means we have to get out of our comfort zone and make a call on a bigger account, to go into a market we've never been in before, to figure out a problem that stretches us, to confront somebody that seems like the biggest power in the world. Excuse me. But in Leviticus 19, it says, don't pervert justice, don't defer to the great and powerful, nor be partial to the needy, but do the right thing. And we're not going to cause a needy person to grow if we're afraid to talk about, you got to face some stuff. And we're not going to be a good whistleblower if we're afraid of people that have power. And we're certainly not going to get a bigger deal if we only call on the size deals that we're comfortable doing. I've got a friend that built a real estate empire, and he said, well, my thing is, he said, I sit down in the middle of every day and I think about everything I'm doing, and if I don't have a 100% psychotic panic attack, I know I'm not trying. Now, here's something about the neurochemistry of this. You don't learn except in a state of arousal. That's why the vineyard grower wants the vine to have to stretch itself. Stretch your people. Don't break them. Stretch them. And lastly, and I'll close with this, it's transcendence. Every leader must answer the question, and I'll ask you this question now, and I guarantee you, all of you will get it right, because everybody always does. If they don't, we put them in a rubber room. Are you God? See, everybody checks the right box. But when we follow them around, they act like they are. The wake is like they are. And all of us have this wish to be God in us. And even a codependent, you don't have to be domineering to want to be omnipresent. Can't delegate. You don't have to be, anybody can feel like they're supposed to be omniscient. That's the wish to be God. Can't have smarter voices in the room. You have some people that are control freaks. They try to be omnipotent. That's the wish to be God too. We talk about transcendence. Have we come to grips as leaders, as parents, as spouses, that it is not about me only. It is about things that transcend me, things that are bigger than my interests and my comfort. God, the mission, the values, the customer. See, when everybody has come together for this big purpose and this why, and there are values that transcend what it feels like to lose that deal. There are values that transcend what it feels like to give up some of my people to another department. There's values that transcend us. There's the calling, there's the mission. And when we have that one, then all of these begin to come into place. So I encourage you, you all wouldn't be here if you weren't at that level of the IQ and the brains and the experience and the degrees and all of that. But the thing I love about this group is you've made it a call to go past that. You've made it a call to be made complete, to be made mature in His image. And these qualities are in you. And as Peter says, let them be increasing, and you will not be without fruit. God bless you guys.
So transcendent values that must take priority is such a great reminder from Henry Cloud. And it's this desire to pursue our highest possible good for God's glory that is the driving force behind FCCI. And we trust that our virtue, our wake, is generating great results in your life and cultivating amazing relationships within the body of Christ. And to that end, we continue to foster business leader events, groups, and conferences around the country, in fact, around the world. Check those out at fcci.org. Thanks for listening, and may God continue to encourage your journey as you lead a company for Christ.